Hello and welcome to Americana X News Watch. I'm Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. If you're new here, welcome to the show. If you've been here before, welcome to you too. News Watch is a news commentary show, common sense show, give you a little bit of perspective on the news, what's going on right now, and ultimately this is encouragement for people that want to get beyond the sensationalized headlines. Something a little more substantive. Of course, there's the headline, and then there's the stuff that's driving the headlines. If you haven't yet, like, comment, subscribe. Also, ring the bell. You know, there's one thing that America needs more of. It's more cowbell. Now, today on the episode, this episode of News Watch, I want to do something a little bit different. Well, one thing is this is a Monday. I wanted to get this episode out like really quick before the first presidential debate because I think that my attention's going to shift after tomorrow. So I was like, oh, this is something that this is an episode that I felt was really important to get out because this is sort of based on what we're seeing right now in a lot of the current news cycle. And so that's why I prioritized getting this out today and making this special episode. So I guess to give a little bit of context for where I'm going in this episode, this one's going to be called Saving Our Culture from the Brink, rather than resigning ourselves to nihilism. To know me is to know that I am an optimist. I guess you could say I'm a realist, but then I choose to be an optimist after I look at things through the lens of reality. But really, this is what I'm thinking about. Okay, so last week I did an episode that was about Donald Trump executing the executive order to stop critical race theory training in government agencies and corporations that are funded in part by government dollars. And I felt like it was such a big moment when he did that. It gave me a few other ideas of some things I wanted to talk about, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Primarily, the thing that I was thinking about is I was thinking about the ramifications of that executive order. For me, I really believe that executive order that he signed last week, it's going to have far-reaching implications after that. It's going to have like an echo effect that's going to ripple out, so to speak, and hit a whole bunch of other things going forward in coming months and into 2021. And I may get to a little bit of that today, but really what I want to focus in on is one of the things that, okay, so my thought process was, I believe, unironically, that Donald Trump could literally be saving America right now with steps like this executive order. And there's been several other things that would point to evidence that he's turning things around just in 3 short years. But there's something else I was seeing. Of course, there's the potential for the cascade of positive effects from actions like this one. But then I also think about the conservatives out there, and I would say all liberals, but a percentage of conservatives that are really invested in ideas that say, well, look, yes, there's some positive effects that Donald Trump has put out there, but ultimately we've already crossed the waypoint of no return. There's this demographic cliff. We're going to hit it, and it's going to be downhill, and it's just going to be Democrats forever from now on because the demographics have shifted, and everybody's going to vote liberal, and conservatives are going to end, and America will become, a third world country in a total desolate wasteland. It's going to be like Mad Max. And so that's what I wanted to talk about here today. Because while I understand where a lot of these are mostly young people, young conservatives trying to make sense of their reality. So they come away with somewhat of like a black-pilled perspective based on, and by the way, this isn't completely unfounded stuff, okay? I think I said this a little bit in my last video. They cite statistics. They have really well-respected authors where they're looking at what these guys are saying and they're putting big themes together. One guy came to mind as an author, Pat Buchanan, some of his writing that kind of says, hey, are we going to make it to 2025? Is America doomed? We're going to hit this demographic cliff. These types of thoughts, right? And what it leads all these young people to sort of put the pieces together on the puzzle is that conservatism does not have a future in America. Ultimately, we're going to reach this point of no return, and it's going to be over. So, like I said, don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't see the validity in some of their points. But what I would like to do here in this episode today is give a slightly different perspective. Okay. So, not negating that group, and by the way, that group will sometimes be referred to as the alt-right. Okay. And that bothers me. I don't, you're not going to hear me use the word alt-right to describe this group, because it is my opinion that alt-right is just like a dismissive term. It's a way of dismissing people. And I think it's just like a group of conservatives that are trying to figure things out and create projections based on the things they're looking at. Okay. So they may be in a lower percentage. They may be further right. That's possible. But I just would rather not dismiss the argument. I'd rather just look at it and then take it seriously and then honestly address it. Okay. So let's do that. This is what I'd like to say to all the people out there that are in that mindset right now, that think, we are in an irreversible phase right now where America is going to slide into a third world country and it's over. What if Donald Trump's actions, along with other conservative leaders that truly care about our country, that are rising up right now in the next 5, 10, 15, up to 20 years, are able to, with concerted effort, stem the tide on this depressing and bleak statistical analysis that we are currently using to justify a definition of a black-pilled future, or being black-pilled today, looking at that negative future. What if things like ending critical race theory training could trigger some other effects? And in the coming years, we literally see a turnaround in America. I'd like to share a few inspirational things with you guys here today. But before I do that, I'd just like to share this one conversation. It's just like one moment in a conversation I had with someone else in a YouTube thread and somebody else's video last week. This young man, I'm not going to share his name, I'll just protect him. But this is a comment that he left for me. And I feel like this is really indicative of what a lot of these kind of young conservatives that are putting together a bunch of statistical analysis to come up with a conclusion that we're doomed. This is, and by the way, this guy might be a liberal too. So I actually don't know if this guy's a person that's on the right, that's in this group of black-pilled folks, or if he's just straight up liberal. But I'm going to read his comment and just answer the comment regardless of where he's coming from in terms of underlying motivation. He says in part, nothing points to a peaceful future. This is after I said, I made a point that I think we're headed in the right direction. Things are going to get better. Okay, so just to give you some context. All right. Dems will be counting votes weeks after the election. Dems will push for another impeachment. Virus panic will be ignited by media. BLM Antifa violence will continue unabated and will pick up in tempo around the election. Police will be too scared to take to the streets. The United States demographics have shifted. We have begun the grueling descent into third world status, and it's never going to get better. Trump's reelection will offer a brief respite, and then the country will be a democratic socialist monoparty until we get a bona fide dictator. And there's a lot to speak to there, but really, I guess I'm just going to focus on one part of this thread, and I think it's what it all really comes down to. He's looking at events that have happened in the last year primarily. Maybe he's looking at the last 4 years. I guess this person, if they were to point to indicators that were saying we were coming to this point, you might be able to rewind the clock back 30, 40 years when the Democrats, the liberals, won the culture war at that time. And we started seeing a lot of shifts with political correctness that have led us down this path. You might even be able to go back before that time. Okay, so maybe this person is not just talking about the last 30 or 40 years, maybe they're going back 50 or 60 years. Maybe we go back to the New Deal, FDR, like all these things were set in motion that are leading us towards ultimately this type of what he's describing as a third world status for America. The demographic socialist monoparty. I've heard this a lot of times from a lot of places. But I think hey, at least he put it all in one comment for me, so it's very easy for me to address. Okay, so, look, I understand. For the last 30 or 40 years, there has been sort of a march through all of our major institutions, and this has been covered many times by many different commentators and pundits, but it leads us to a time here in the last at least 3 years where Donald Trump's been putting up with a lot of crap, right? We've seen it, okay? And even in the last year, we've seen it escalate, maybe because we're in an election year and liberals have themselves programmed to think this is the solution, all the actions they've been taking recently. It could be a number of things, but I believe we could make an equally strong case that even though the last 30 or 40 years in particular has been a sort of political correctness takeover, which has led us to this kind of critical race theory driven, ideologically possessed nonsense that we're seeing from a whole generation of young people that are now actively working to destroy our country, all right? Yes, that's been happening. But you could also make a case that 244 years of history, you could point to a lot of turnarounds where things looked bleak for America before, where the odds seemed like they were stacked against us. Things weren't in our favor. It seemed like we were up against it and we weren't going to overcome. What I'm saying is there's a good reason to believe that here today, civility will win out over anarchy. I guess you could say the conservatives and the Republicans are the party of civility. And the Democrats, as much as they try to tell you they're the party of empathy and care and love, they're actually the totalitarian dictatorship that wants to turn our world into an anarchy. Just as a quick side note, I don't know if you guys saw this this weekend. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson did an interview. It was like a 7-minute interview with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. It was a complete joke. They pulled out every ridiculous trite platitude you could, and they just did 7 minutes of just rapid fire bullcrap trite. It's like in the streets, you can see people burning and looting and crime and violence and murder, and this is all on the left, all driven by the left's narrative. And yet we have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson coming on this completely tone-deaf interview to what's actually going on in culture. And he says at the end of the thing, I made a quick note of this, he said, truth and progress through humanity and kindness. What a gobbledygook word salad garbage. It's all fine and good for liberals to say this kind of line right here. All fine and good. But the proof is in the pudding, guys. The proof is on the streets, all right? You guys stirred up this pot of nonsense, and the result is what we're seeing on the streets. So you can say all you want, all these nice little platitudes delivered to us, truth in progress, in humanity. And everybody's so good and kind. We're not buying it anymore. Nobody's buying this. In fact, if you go to this, I think it was on Instagram, if you go to this video that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson made, this interview, you can see in the comment section how people are reacting to it. They're just like, sorry, Dwayne, not having it. This is just, it's so silly it goes against reality so much, we just can't even take this seriously for a second. At any rate, getting back to the subject at hand. What I want to do here is I want to shift our focus again after talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I want to shift my focus from talking about sort of like this bleak third world future for America, this demographic cliff we're going to hit, and it's all downhill, and everything's going to go to pot, okay? I want to shift focus. I want to look at early American history just for a moment, okay? And then we're going to come back to that thread again where I was talking about that, the guy saying that America's over. Okay, I want to look at a 12-year period in American history. Okay, this is a quick little history lesson, I guess. A little story I'm going to tell you. This is actually sourced from I'm going to put a link in the description here. This is sourced from a documentary made by a guy named Ken Burns. Total liberal, guys. I'm citing a liberal on this one, okay? It was called The West, all right? Really great documentary, really cool to go through. I think it's like 9 hours long total. But here's the good news. I'm going to give you like a 5-minute clip. I'm going to condense a lot of the information here down to 5 minutes. You don't even have to watch the thing if you don't want to. No, I don't get to all of it here. I only get to, I don't know, a couple episodes total of all the content there is in that thing. At any rate, this time in American history, this comes right on the heels of the Louisiana Purchase, okay? So right around 1800, so we're looking at 1803, 1804, 1806, up to that time. So 1804 to 1806, this is a map right here of the Lewis and Clark Expedition. The Lewis and Clark Expedition was 1804 to 1806, okay? Right before that time, in 1803, is when Thomas Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase. That's the purple area on this map that you're looking at right now. So the Louisiana Purchase, the French had claimed what it is, like 500,000 acres in this area, which we're now seeing there, is the Louisiana Purchase. And Thomas Jefferson purchased that. And then anything to the west of that, you can see it's the Spanish territory in the yellow down there in the southwest. And then you can see over to the northwest, that gray area would have been called the Oregon Territory, and that would have been claimed by the British settling from the north in Canada. Okay, so this is setting the stage for us, okay? I just wanted to share that with you because this allows me to talk about this next period. It's going to cover the years of 1821 to 1833. So we're looking at, I don't know, 12 years, but up to maybe 25 years, something like that, of actual American history, okay? This right here is just a quick little photo I took of the screen of the West documentary showing what it looked like. This would have been the map of what is now the continental United States. This is in 1821 up to the Louisiana Purchase. So now America runs up to the Rocky Mountains. To the west of that, we're seeing the Oregon Territory, and we're seeing Mexico. Okay, this is land that was claimed. Okay, we're going to be talking about claiming of land, right, here in just a minute or two. But of course, this is what it looks like now, right? So you get kind of a before and after, right? So here's the before, right? And then here's the after. So we're going to talk a little bit here about, and by the way, this is just all from my notes from the documentary The West. This is not me speaking, okay? So I know there's going to be a lot of liberals. This is going to make them angry when I'm just the messenger, okay? So at this point in American, well, pre-American history or pre-continental United States history, it was a giant land grab, okay? Ethnic groups from all over the world were settling what is now the USA. People from points everywhere around the compass, right? You'd have the Spanish came up from the south, the British and the French arrived from the north, the Chinese and the Russians by going east. But here's the interesting thing. It was the last group to arrive that would eventually name the West. Now, the group that we now call the Native Americans, we would have called them Indians back in the day, or call them different things. had already been in this land, already came across the Bering Straits several hundred years before. But people at that time were just laying claim to land all over the West. As soon as they showed up, they put a flag in the ground. We own this, okay? I think I was going to make this point a little later, but I can make it now. At this time, when the American Indians, or the Indians at that time, would have been just chilling on their land, as other people would show up, they would just see them as either people they would go to war with or people they would trade with. There's a lot of trade deals going on at that time. So if they're just seeing these people show up and they go, I guess we'll trade with these folks, the Spanish show up, the French, the Russians, whoever it is, right? They're just going, okay, we're trading with you now. And these people are showing up and just putting a flag in the ground, right? It's like, hi, we're trading with you. Our land. It was going on all over the place. In fact, for hundreds of years before any other people showed up, it was something like 200 some odd tribes. They were all going to war with each other. Over what? A lot of times it was boundaries. It was land. So all this was going on for years and years and years and years and years. Back and forth, this group, that group. But as we're going to see here in just a moment, although there were many people that were laying claim to all this land, there would be one system of government that would ultimately win out. Okay, so when Indians were the only ones to occupy the land, it was common for these tribes, 200 some odd tribes, to see war to be considered the highest calling. And that's an interesting way of describing war. The highest calling. I'm called to go to war. Wealth at that time was measured in slaves. No kidding. Wealth at that time was measured in slaves. This is Indians enslaving other Indians, by the way. Okay? So this tribe enslaving that tribe. So I think that in American history, like the way it's taught now, if you look at the way high school and general middle school education is teaching it, it's as if America invented slavery. No, slavery's been apparent and it's been present in every culture ever since the beginning of man. And Indians were doing it to themselves. I think that there's this narrative that gets spun about American Indians that were these really sweet, peaceful, loving, kind, noble people, and then just all these white people showed up and destroyed their reality, when it's not at all what was going on. These people considered war to be their highest value. They did not experience an idyllic life before other nations of people started showing up in the American continent, or what would become the American continent. These are people that were going to war with each other, and they were taking scalps of each other, okay? And why were they doing that? Why were they taking each other's scalps? Because the highest thing you can aspire to is being a warrior. Well, why was being a warrior the most highest thing you could aspire to? It's because the value systems of the American Indians. Of course, in many ways, they were marvelous, by the way. But in some ways, they were just completely horrible. In American Indian tribes of that time, this is before America, before the whole thing, a man could not court an Indian woman until he had proved his courage. How do you prove your courage? You prove your courage in battle. War is used as a measuring stick for how much courage or how much of a man the guy was, which is one reason why so many Indian men were anxious about having a good war record. The men were seriously afraid of what the tribe, particularly the women of the tribe, would think of them if they were cowards. Just imagine this for a second. If your only way of getting married and reproducing, having kids, is if you came back home from a battle with a bunch of scalps of other people. You know what a scalp is? It's where you take the skin like this and you take a knife and you literally carve the top layer of their skin off the top of their head and pull their hair off. If you come back with 3, 4, 5 scalps, that shows you are the man when it comes to war. When it comes to battle, you have complete courage. You are going to have access to women. Imagine if you were just closed off from having access to women at all. And women were like, yeah, that guy's a coward. He's got no courage. You couldn't reproduce. You couldn't have kids. That's a heavy burden to carry. One of the most powerful and largest tribes of the West was called the Lakota Indian tribe, also known as the Sioux. These were the most badass of the badasses. Okay, these tribes, this tribe was the toughest. And what was their value? What was their motto, right? What was the ethos that drove their culture? And this is according to the experts that were interviewed on this The West documentary. They said for the Lakota Indian tribe, and for many tribes it was similar to this, their motto would have been to be feared or hated. Imagine that. The ethos that drives your culture is to be feared or hated. Well, it seems to make sense. It goes along with the war thing, right? I'm going to show up. I want this other tribe to either fear me or hate me. That's my value system. Because if that happens, then I'm seen as the badass warrior. I'm going to have access to women. I'm going to be able to have children. I'm going to be able to reproduce. I'm going to be able to replicate and pass on my lineage. And that's what it's all about. So every time this group of tribes bumps into another tribe, what were they doing? They were either creating allyship or they were going to war. So you'd have a few tribes that get together and be allies, and they go to war with some other tribe or a group of tribes. And that was the whole deal. Okay? So why am I spending so much time on this? Right? Why am I talking about this, and what does this have to do with where we're going here? Right? It's because if you have a system of governance, if you have a system of, let's just say, it's the general ethos that drives your culture. If that is one where your highest value is to either be feared or hated, and everything's based on war, eventually your tribe is going to dwindle in numbers. Particularly if there are people settling that land from all over the world and start bumping into more tribes. Their government system, their system of government was shitty. They had bad ideas driving their government. Look, anything based on fear and hate is ultimately not going to be able to compete against a system of government that's based on Judeo-Christian values. It's not going to work. That's why ultimately the people that were settling from America, they're settling into this land, right? Land that was claimed originally by the French. What was it, like 500,000 acres just claimed by the French? And what they do, they sold it, right? I mean, hey, we could be building a border right now along the Mississippi River if things would have stayed the way they were back then. But it's not the way it went, okay? History went the way it went, right? Am I making an excuse? No. What I'm saying is this. The French had settled in that territory, and then America said, we'd like to purchase that territory from you. And they said, okay, for multiple reasons, we're selling that. So they did, okay? And then the Spanish claimed all that Mexican territory. What was it? From Utah to California, Texas, New Mexico, all these states that are now states of the United States today were claimed by Mexico or the Spanish. And then north of that would have been the UK territory, and that would have been the Oregon territory, which would have been Washington State and Oregon State. Why'd they have it? They just claimed it. And the people that were from America that were settling these areas knew they were leaving America. They just had to have land. They just needed to expand outside. Things were getting crowded over in the American territory. So they just started settling. Okay, I guess I'm now in Mexico. Okay, I guess I'm now in the UK territory. All right, it is what it is. But as soon as they got there, what did those people do? And this is according to the West documentary, by the way. People were settling from America to these new places and going, this should just be a part of America. And they were doing it again and again and again. Many times, with the exception of a couple of wars that made up this tapestry of how we kind of went from, the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean in 12 years. Some of it was just through purchases, some of it was settled peacefully. Some of it settled by war. Tejas became Texas, and it was the Texas territory, like its own nation for like 10 years before it became part of the United States, And it only became part of the United States because Sam Houston wanted it to become a part of the United States. There wasn't a war to settle that one. At any rate, I'm starting to get off topic. I need to get back on topic. So the reason why the American Indians, or the Indians, however you want to describe them, eventually their systems broke down is because they had systems of government that were not sustainable. And this is something I think most people don't want to pay attention to. They don't want to look at it honestly. It's easier just to create a moral storyline or narrative in our heads that we're being good by giving land back to some people. Bad system of government based on bad ideas. It was doomed to fail. Sure, as long as they only had to bump into 200 some odd tribes that had the same technology as them, they would be okay and they'd be able to maintain culture. But as soon as they start running into Russians and Chinese and British and French and Americans and Europeans of all kinds, you can't just keep going to war with everybody you meet and expect that you're going to keep your culture going. You'll eventually run out of people. So at this time, early 1800s, the big score, the way to look at what was going on for all these different countries that were settling this area at that time was all of them were competing to locate and claim the Northwest Passage. And that's what the Lewis and Clark expedition was really about. What it was really about was the stretch of water that would connect the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. Every nation was trying to find and control that Northwest Passage because the nation that controlled that Northwest Passage controlled the continent. That's how serious it was. Thomas Jefferson, he of course made that purchase of about 500,000 acres that went from St. Louis to the Rocky Mountains. And the other half of the land that is now the USA was claimed by Great Britain and Mexico. We know that. But the Indians had several hundred-year head start. Why didn't they defend it? Why didn't they control it? There's many different reasons. I'm pointing at one of them, which is their system of government, right? Another one might have been they didn't utilize the wheel, right? You could point to the fact that Europeans came with contracts and understood deeds and understood land and understood how to control land with paperwork, right? There's all these things that you could point to. But I think the way to look at this from the research that I'm doing, and this is not necessarily in the documentary, but the U.S. constitutional government model was just plain more appealing than other systems of government. People are settling in all these other places, and they're going, UK, yeah, okay, so basically I'm a subject to the king. And if I move to Mexico, okay, basically I'm under dictatorship rule by this guy that calls himself a president, but he also refers to himself as the Napoleon of the West. Yeah, that guy's a dictator. Okay, so do I want to be dictated by this group or dictated to by that group? Or maybe I could be a part of that one over there, and they want to have autonomy built in. and personal freedom and land ownership. Oh yeah, I think I like that system a little better. And all of this rapid expansion and change that happened in America that pushed us from the Rocky Mountains all the way over to the Pacific Ocean, made us the full continental United States, all of that happened. We closed the gap in about 12 years. There were some real rock stars that were involved in that. And I actually want to do a deeper dive on this. And I want to do a whole series on my show called Zeitgeist, where I go through and do several episodes that kind of walk us through this season in more detail, where we look at things like the Civil War and we look at the gold rush and all this stuff. But right now, I just want to focus on this period right here. I just want to focus on this kind of in a broad sense, because I'm getting at something here. I'm taking this back to where we were at the beginning of this episode about fighting for America and looking for reasons to use our imagination to see how in a short time the tide can be stemmed, the tide can be turned, right? What I'm getting at is this. In just 12 short years, the United States government, built on the strength of Judeo-Christian values, with a strong constitution written, provided a bedrock, provided a root that could then provide for the kind of growth that the continent needed. It could provide for the kind of protections from a government, but it also could provide for the freedoms on an individual level in a way that none of the other systems could. Could we have predicted that we would have closed the gap in 12 years? It would have been difficult. Even the best statisticians, even the best people in the world to predict that between Thomas Jefferson and Polk, you got we just closed the gap all the way over to the Pacific Ocean, right? But that's the way it went. And what I want to encourage all of the young Americans out there that might be watching this now, you might be a young conservative that's kind of bought into some of these concepts of, well, throw our hands in the air, it's over. We're going to hit the demographic cliff, guys, and the liberals are going to ruin it forever, right? Let's look at a few other things. Let's just look at a few other options for what could potentially happen in the next 20 years, right? Because I think there's evidence even now. Some of it's even statistical, but some of it, you just see it happening, or you can sense that it's happening. One of the things is we're beginning to see some of the groups that used to be a monolith, like a group that would vote in a block, beginning to break apart, right? We're seeing that the gay vote is there's reporting polling of 45%. If it even gets close to 45% of gays voting Republican for Donald Trump in this next election, that's a big thing. It's huge. Look at the Hispanic community. They're beginning to get a little more aware of things, right? They're beginning to catch on a little more. And now they're going, Latinos for Trump. Huge number of those. Blacks for Trump. Huge number of people shifting right now. If that happens, if we see citizens of America, of whatever descent, of whatever race, cultural background, lifestyle, whatever, are beginning to shift Republican or conservative, that is huge. Would Pat Buchanan have written that into his book? Whatever it was 10, 20 years ago when he was writing these books? I don't know. I actually don't know what his most recent book is off the top of my head. I haven't read every book by the guy, but I just know that if you're writing a book 20 years ago, would he have even predicted a Donald Trump figure? Maybe. But it's possible that even our best experts could not have predicted there would have been a Donald Trump. At this point in time, in the 11th hour of his presidency, his first term, he is signing an executive order to put a stake in the heart of critical race theory, which is literally, I use the word heart to describe critical race theory. It's the heart of the liberal movement right now. Everything liberals believe is built on the foundation of critical race theory. You take that away from them, that party's going to crumble. You're going to see a lot of positive effects in America fast. Last bit of encouragement that I'm going to leave you with here, okay? Just something else to be thinking about. Something that's sometimes difficult to even quantify. America is a role model for the rest of the world. Think about that. When we make a big change here in America, the nations of the world role model America, particularly the Western civilized nations, but even some developing nations. Literally, whatever happens in America, in a matter of weeks or months, you'll see it showing up in the news cycles of other countries. We riot, they riot. We have Trump derangement syndrome. Europe has Trump derangement syndrome. They make a balloon of a baby Trump. You know, if we move more nationalist and have more national pride in America, you'll see European nations and South American nations begin to have more national pride. This can be turned around faster than we think. That's the encouragement I want to leave you with. Not to see the sweeping trends as, a threat, or set in stone, but rather see these things as just waypoints and signposts. It's possible, yes, of course, the thing could go down in flames. We could hit the demographic cliff and it'd be over. But what if there's this major shift that happens and the monoliths of voting break apart? And now we move into this new season where people see the value of conservative values. People all over the country, even liberals, and even the Liberal Party begins to jettison all these extremist leftists that are rioting in our country right now. And by 2024, they're putting up somebody more moderate. Somebody that's more conservative, even though they're a liberal in name. It's possible. I'm just saying. Or we can just, use all the statistical analysis we've already done, stick our head in the sand, and just insist that things must be the way that we've seen them for the last 10 years, and there's no escaping it, and the world's over, and then I don't have to face the fact that I might have been wrong for 10 years, right? What I'm saying here is that there are several key changes that, if they're made, we could have a positive American future where we're turning back towards the Judeo-Christian values that our country is founded on. People get more excited about that, returning to civility and moving away from the popularity of defunding police and anarchy and all the nonsense that goes along with that. Using violence to meet your political ends. So I want to encourage all the young conservatives out there that might be watching this. If you could, take a beat, begin to open up your imagination to something else. Begin to let a positive attitude in that allows you to set your mind to work, looking for new solutions, maybe from unconventional places, so that you can be a part of this resurgence of conservative values, the rise of a new conservative age. As I said before, as important as it is to pay attention to statistical analysis and look to current political experts, whoever they may be, it could be equally important to develop the muscle of creating an imagination within yourself based on something bigger than a conservative think tank or a statistician breaking down, what illegal immigration is going to do and how it's going to destroy our country. Sometimes you have to say, I'm going to look for evidence that empowers me to contribute to saving my country rather than expecting this black-pilled narrative that I've just been handed by somebody else is going to be the way things are going to go. It's time to get fired up, you guys. Bringing this episode to an end here. It's time to get excited about America being a great country, the great country it can be again, and, ignore some of the narrative that's spun by celebrities like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who doesn't really know what he's got himself into, getting into political bed with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. At any rate, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I've said here in this episode? I'll invite all, comments of love or hate, whatever it is. Let's have a conversation. All right, so this has been Americana X News Watch. I've been Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. We'll see you next time.